Before we jump into this crazy story, let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Maybe it's a bustling apartment block in New York, a peaceful lakeside cabin up in Minnesota, or a quiet cul-de-sac in sunny Arizona. I love seeing just how far these wild Karen tales of chaos and karma can reach. The first time I saw that bright red Chevrolet Colorado sitting in my driveway, I thought it was a mistake. A mix-up. Maybe a delivery driver who got turned around. It was a spotless Saturday morning, the kind where the sun bounces off every windshield like polished chrome, and I had my coffee in hand, ready to start a slow, quiet weekend. But there it was, parked dead center, blocking my garage door like it owned the place. I stepped outside, expecting to see someone climbing out, maybe with an apologetic wave. Instead, two women were already halfway down the sidewalk, heading toward the corner. Both were heavy-set, wearing loud floral shirts and shorts, hair frizzed from the humidity. They walked with a kind of exaggerated purpose people get when they've already decided they're not wrong. One of them, the taller one with short, stiff blonde hair, glanced back at me with a smirk that made my skin tighten. "Excuse me," I called, still holding my coffee like it was some kind of peace offering. "Is this your truck?" "Yeah," she said, without breaking stride. "Just for a minute. We're going to Cheryl's." I didn't know a Cheryl yet, but that was my first introduction, Patricia, as I would later learn, and her younger sister Cheryl. Patricia was 40, give or take, the sort of person who made eye contact only to let you know she was ignoring you. Cheryl was a little softer spoken, shorter, and had that knack for standing just behind Patricia, like her personal echo. That first time, I let it go. I told myself maybe they had an emergency, or maybe the street was packed. But when I got home from running errands 3 hours later and found the truck still there, I knew this wasn't just bad manners, it was an attitude. The second time was worse. A week later, same day, same time, same truck. Only this time, when I asked them to move it, Patricia laughed. Actually laughed. "It's just for a bit," she said, like I was the one being unreasonable. Cheryl chimed in with, "We're neighbors. Neighbors help each other." Help each other. That line stuck in my head like a splinter. I started noticing how the sisters treated everyone else on the street. Loud conversations on speakerphone, dragging their garbage cans into the middle of the sidewalk, their dog roaming without a leash. And always, that truck gleaming like a fire engine, parked exactly where it didn't belong. I tried the polite route. Notes under the wipers, clear and friendly. "Please don't park here. Private driveway." I even put up a small sign, nothing ugly, just enough to remind them. Every time, the sign would be ignored, and the truck would be back within days. The worst was the Sunday my parents came over. My dad's got bad knees, and my mom doesn't move as quickly as she used to. But when they pulled up, they couldn't get into my driveway. Patricia's truck was sitting there like a brick wall. My parents had to park down the block, walking past that same red paint, that same smug glint off the chrome. Patricia and Cheryl were sitting on Cheryl's porch sipping iced tea like they'd done me a favor. That was the day something shifted in me. It wasn't just about parking anymore. It was the principle. The blatant, smug disrespect. Still, I tried one more time to solve it peacefully. I caught Patricia as she was unloading groceries from the bed of the truck. "Look, I've asked a few times already." "Yeah, I remember," she said, tossing a bag over her shoulder. "We're just here for a bit. Don't make it a big deal." "It is a big deal," I said, keeping my voice level. "This is my driveway." She slammed the tailgate shut with a bang that made my teeth clench. "Relax. You're acting like we stole something." Cheryl, carrying a carton of soda, added, "It's not like you're using it every second of the day." I stood there, hands tightening around the grocery bag I'd been carrying for my own car. And I realized right then they weren't going to stop. Not because they didn't understand, but because they didn't care. Over the next month, the truck kept appearing. Sometimes for hours, sometimes for the whole afternoon. Once, they even blocked me in, so I couldn't leave for work until they decided to come back. I tried the HOA, but Patricia was on the board. The email I got in return was so toothless, it could have been written by her. "We encourage neighbors to work things out amicably." Amicably. I tried amicable until it was worn thin. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I'd just gotten back from a run, sweat dripping into my eyes, when I saw the red truck again. This time, they'd parked farther forward than usual, completely covering my garage door. And on the windshield, I spotted something, a small rectangular sticker, sun-faded at the edges. Registration almost expired. My eyes shifted to the corner of the windshield. Insurance, also close to lapsing. I walked around the truck, taking it all in. And then it hit me. This wasn't just an annoyance anymore. It was an opportunity. I went inside and started researching. The laws in our state were clear. If a vehicle was parked on private property without permission, it could be towed at the owner's expense. If the fees went unpaid, the towing company could sell it at public auction to recover costs. And here was the kicker. If the sale price didn't cover the fees, the owner got nothing. The idea started as a spark, then grew hotter the more I read. I imagined Patricia's face when she realized her precious truck wasn't coming back. I imagined Cheryl's shocked silence. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about ending the game they'd been playing since the day they met me. Still, I needed to be smart. I couldn't just call a tow truck in a fit of anger. I'd need clear proof they'd ignored my warnings. I'd need timing on my side. And I'd need to make sure it happened when they couldn't wriggle out of it. The plan formed in quiet, careful pieces over the next week. I bought 2 new no parking signs, big and bold, with reflective letters. I mounted one directly beside my garage door, the other right at the front edge of my driveway, where no one could miss it. I charged a small GoPro camera I kept for road trips and positioned it in my front window, angled perfectly toward the driveway. Then I waited. The following Saturday, the air was heavy with the smell of cut grass and barbecue from somewhere down the street. I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea, pretending to read the news on my phone. Right on schedule, the sisters' truck turned the corner. Music thumped from the speakers, windows down, Patricia in the driver's seat with her sunglasses pushed up on her head. Cheryl had a plastic grocery bag in her lap, picking at something inside. They pulled in like they were arriving at their own home. The truck rolled forward, tires crunching against the concrete, until the chrome grille was a foot from my garage door. Patricia climbed out first, glancing at the new signs without a flicker of concern. Cheryl followed, adjusting her floral shirt and smirking as they walked past me. "Morning," Patricia said, her tone syrupy with mock politeness. "Morning," I replied, matching her fake sweetness. They disappeared around the corner toward Cheryl's place, leaving their pride and joy parked squarely on my property. I looked at the truck, then at the GoPro, quietly recording, and felt the pieces click into place. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the number I'd saved 2 days earlier. A towing company I'd used once before, a guy named Vince who knew the rules inside and out. When he answered, I didn't waste time. "Hey, Vince. It's Dan. I've got a red Chevrolet Colorado sitting in my driveway without permission. No, the owner's not here. Yeah, I've got signs posted and video proof." Vince chuckled. "How fast do you want it gone?" I looked at the truck one more time, gleaming in the sunlight like it thought it was untouchable. "As fast as you can get here." I ended the call, leaned back in my chair, and took another sip of iced tea. Somewhere in the distance, Patricia and Cheryl were probably laughing about whatever they thought they'd gotten away with. But they had no idea that the next time they saw their truck, it wouldn't be sitting in my driveway. It would be sitting on an auction block. Vince arrived faster than I expected. I had barely finished my glass of iced tea when I heard the low growl of his tow truck turning onto my street. It rolled to a stop in front of my driveway, the metal winch gleaming in the sun. Vince climbed out, his ball cap low over his eyes, clipboard in one hand, gloves in the other. He gave me a small nod, the kind you give when you're about to handle business. "That the one?" he asked, already sizing up the red Chevrolet Colorado like a butcher inspecting a cut of meat. "That's the one," I said, my voice steady. "Owner's not here. Private property. You know the drill." Vince smirked. "Always a pleasure to help neighbors enforce the law." He set to work without hesitation. The metal arms of the lift slid under the truck's rear tires with a hiss, the chains clinking as he tightened them. The sound carried down the street, a metallic rhythm that drew curtains back in nearby houses. A few neighbors stepped onto their porches, pretending to be watering plants or checking their mail, but their eyes never left the scene. I stood back, hands in my pockets, letting the moment breathe. The air was thick with the smell of sun-baked asphalt, the faint squeak of Vince's hydraulic pump echoing in the quiet afternoon. Halfway through the process, a familiar voice shattered the calm. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Patricia's voice could have cut glass. She was storming down the sidewalk, Cheryl hurrying to keep up. Both were flushed from the heat, floral shirts clinging slightly to their shoulders. Patricia's sunglasses were perched crookedly on her head, one hand pointing straight at Vince. "That's my truck," she barked, striding directly into the driveway. Vince didn't look up. "Ma'am, this vehicle is parked on private property without permission. The owner of the property has requested it be removed." "That's not true." Cheryl jumped in, her voice high and breathless. "We're his neighbors. He lets us park here all the time." I stepped forward then, my voice calm but firm. "No, I don't. I've asked you repeatedly to stop parking here. You've ignored every warning, every sign. This is my driveway, and I'm done asking." Patricia's eyes narrowed, the kind of slow, dangerous narrowing that said she'd been caught but refused to admit it. "You can't just tow someone's vehicle because you're in a bad mood." "Actually," Vince said, tightening the last chain, "I can if it's illegally parked." And it is. The truck began to lift, the rear tires leaving the ground. Patricia lunged toward it, hands gripping the tailgate as if she could hold it down by sheer force of will. Vince shot me a glance, and I shook my head slowly. "Ma'am, step back," he said. "You're interfering with a legal tow. That's a fine in itself." Her grip loosened, but her glare never left my face. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. Cheryl hovered behind her, muttering about calling a lawyer. "I'll take my chances," I said. The truck rose fully onto the flatbed, the chains locking in place with a final metallic snap. Vince climbed into the cab, gave me a quick salute, and eased the tow truck down the street. The red Chevrolet Colorado looked almost smaller from the back, its glossy paint catching one last glint of sunlight before it turned the corner and disappeared. Patricia and Cheryl stood frozen for a moment, as if their brains couldn't process the absence of the truck. Then they both turned on me, voices overlapping in a torrent of insults and accusations. "You're petty," Patricia shouted. "You're going to pay for this," Cheryl added. "I didn't raise my voice. You had a choice. You made it." They stormed off toward Cheryl's place, their words trailing behind them like smoke from a fire that hadn't yet gone out. Over the next few days, I kept an eye on my phone. I half expected them to show up with some legal threat or to beg for the truck's return, but neither happened. Instead, I heard from Vince. "They didn't come to get it," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. "Fees are stacking up fast. At this rate, it'll be on the auction block in a couple weeks." I knew why. Patricia wasn't the type to back down quickly. Paying the fees would be admitting defeat, and she'd rather dig her heels in than hand me that satisfaction. Cheryl would back her up, either out of loyalty or stubbornness. I checked the auction listings every few days, watching as the date crept closer. When the notice finally appeared, red Chevrolet Colorado, excellent condition, no reserve, I felt a slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. Auction day arrived hot and bright. The outdoor stage was set up in the middle of a blocked-off street, the polished wooden platform trimmed with colorful banners. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the pavement, a low murmur running through the crowd. I found a spot off to the side, close enough to see everything, but far enough to watch without being obvious. The truck appeared from behind the stage, still shining like it had rolled off a showroom floor. For a moment, I almost admired it. Then I remembered all the mornings I'd found it sitting in my driveway like an uninvited guest. The auctioneer, a tall man in a dark vest, launched into his rapid-fire chant. Bids started low, crawling upward in hesitant increments. The crowd wasn't biting. Trucks were in demand, sure, but everyone here knew that vehicles at impound auctions often came with strings attached, repairs, paperwork, unpaid fees. The number on the wooden board climbed past $50, then $60. I could feel the tension in the air, that awkward quiet when people start wondering if they're missing something. That's when Patricia and Cheryl arrived. I spotted them weaving through the crowd, eyes locked on the stage. Patricia's mouth was already moving, though I couldn't hear her words over the auctioneer's chant. Cheryl's expression was a mix of disbelief and panic. They reached the front just as the bid hit $75. Patricia shouted something, probably stopped the sale, but the auctioneer didn't even glance at her. He called out 80, then 85. The number stalled. A man near the back raised his hand. 87. The auctioneer scanned the crowd. 87. Do I hear 90? 90? No. Going once, going twice. The gavel hit the block with a sharp crack. Sold. $87. The words seemed to hang in the air. A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience, a few people chuckling quietly. The man who'd once stepped forward to handle the paperwork, barely sparing Patricia and Cheryl a glance. Patricia turned toward me then, as if she'd known all along I'd be there. Her face was red, not from the heat, but from something deeper. Embarrassment, fury, the sting of losing in front of a crowd. Cheryl looked smaller somehow, her shoulders slumped, her eyes fixed on the stage where their truck was being driven away. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence between us stretch, the way you let a door close slowly so the person on the other side has time to realize it's locking. The crowd began to disperse, the banners fluttering gently in the breeze. The man with the clipboard posted a new sign beside the stage, Just IN $87. It leaned slightly, the paint still fresh enough to catch the light. Patricia and Cheryl stayed where they were, as if rooted to the spot. Then, without a word, they turned and walked away, the sound of their footsteps fading into the hum of conversation around us. I watched them go, the smell of sun-warmed wood from the stage mixing with the faint tang of exhaust from the departing truck. The auctioneer was already moving on to the next lot, his voice lifting and falling in a practiced rhythm. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and the crowd shifted toward the next bid. But my attention stayed fixed on the space where the truck had been, the way the light hit the empty stage. It was gone, and they couldn't undo it. But something told me this wasn't the last I'd hear from Patricia and Cheryl. Not by a long shot. The sound of the auctioneer's voice still rang in my ears, crisp and sharp like the snap of a breaking twig. The crowd that had gathered in the middle of our quiet suburban street was larger than I'd expected. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months stood shoulder to shoulder, murmuring in disbelief, their eyes darting between the bright red Chevrolet Colorado on the auction stage and the two furious women in floral shirts who stood just feet from me. Patricia and Cheryl were seething, their cheeks flushed, strands of hair sticking to their foreheads in the late morning heat. Both were pointing at me, their fingers trembling with rage as they spat accusations that were half-yelled, half-garbled from the weight of their fury. I didn't flinch. My arms were crossed, my stance planted, my expression calm in a way I knew would drive them insane. The truck, their truck, gleamed under the midday sun, polished to perfection. Every curve of its frame, every edge of the chrome trim caught the light, almost mocking them with its beauty. The polished wooden stage had been set up on the cul-de-sac like something out of a county fair, complete with colorful banners swaying in the breeze. And there, leaning casually against the railing of the stage, were the three suited men from the auction house, one holding a clipboard and occasionally glancing at me with the faintest smirk. A rustic sign rested beside the truck, hand-painted in thick, bold letters, Just IN $87. The number alone was enough to make Patricia's jaw lock in disbelief every time her eyes flicked toward it. I could still see the moment it happened, the gavel drop, the crowd's small gasp, the confirmation that the bright red Colorado, once their pride and joy, had been sold to a scruffy man in a baseball cap for less than the cost of a halfway decent dinner. They hadn't seen it coming. Not the auction. Not the price. Not the way I'd slipped their own arrogance back under their skin like a thorn they couldn't pull out. But now, standing there with them just inches from me, I could see that this wasn't just about the truck. It was about the humiliation. Patricia's eyes darted from my smirk to the small audience of neighbors, then back again, her voice cracking as she shouted something about the law and theft, and you're going to regret this. Cheryl was louder, but less coherent. Her words dissolved into a jumble of insults and shrill tones that carried across the street. The thing was, they had no one to blame but themselves. And I was going to make sure they remembered that for the rest of their lives. It had all started months ago with the first time they parked in my driveway. Just one time, I told myself. Maybe they had a guest over. Maybe they didn't realize. But I knew better. Patricia had given me that smirk even back then, the smug tilt of her head, the way her eyes scanned me like I was an inconvenience rather than a neighbor. Cheryl hadn't even looked at me. I'd knocked on their door, explained politely that I needed my driveway clear, and Patricia had waved me off with a lazy, "We'll be gone in a bit." Except a bit turned into hours, and hours turned into a pattern. A pattern they seemed to enjoy. The weeks that followed were a slow boil. I'd find their truck sitting there when I came home from work, or worse, blocking me in when I needed to leave. Each time I confronted them, the excuses grew bolder. We just needed somewhere closer to unload groceries. Your driveway's wider than ours. You can handle it. We'll be out of the way in no time. Except no time meant whenever they felt like it. And their tone made it clear. They thought they were untouchable. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning when I had an early appointment across town. I walked outside to find their truck angled across my driveway, the front bumper nearly touching my garage door. It was deliberate, parked just enough to make moving my own car impossible. When I knocked, Patricia opened the door in a robe, her hair in curlers, coffee mug in hand. "You'll have to wait," she said flatly. "We're having brunch." I remember staring at her, my jaw tightening, and realizing there was no more reasoning to be done. That's when the idea began to take shape. It wasn't immediate. I mulled it over, tested the edges of it in my mind. I researched. I learned the exact city ordinance about abandoned vehicles and how private property towing worked. I read up on storage fees, lien sales, and the legalities of auctioning a vehicle. I took photos each time they blocked me in. I logged dates, times, and even the smirk on Patricia's face. By the time I was ready to act, I knew every step would be airtight. The day I made the call to the towing company, their truck had been sitting in my driveway for 39 hours straight. The driver was efficient, hooked it up in under 10 minutes, the chain rattling like a drum roll for what was about to unfold. Patricia and Cheryl weren't home when it happened, which was a small blessing. The truck was gone before they even knew it. What they didn't expect, and what made the sting so much worse, was that I didn't just have it towed to a storage yard. I had already filed the paperwork for a lien sale. I'd paid the minimal fees to expedite the process. And when the auction day came, I made sure it wasn't hidden away in some dusty backlot. No, it was right here, on our street, on a stage. The morning of the auction was surreal. Workers arrived early to set up the platform, banners, and sound system. Neighbors peeked through blinds, curiosity pulling them outside. By the time the auctioneer climbed the steps, the street buzzed with energy. Patricia and Cheryl showed up late, clearly having only just learned what was happening. The look on their faces when they saw their truck under those bright banners was worth every sleepless night I'd spent planning this. The bidding was quick, almost anticlimactic. A few half-hearted offers, a pause, then that final number, $87. A price so insultingly low it was poetic. The gavel fell. Cheers and laughter erupted from parts of the crowd. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for words that wouldn't come. Cheryl's face was redder than the truck. Now here we were, moments after the sale, the heat of their anger rolling off them in waves. I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood on us, some sympathetic, most entertained. Patricia stepped closer, her finger jabbing toward my chest, but I didn't move. Instead, I leaned in just enough for my words to be for her ears alone. "You parked in my driveway," I said quietly. "Now you don't have a driveway or a truck." Her eyes widened, just slightly, the way someone's do when they realize the game is over and they've lost badly. Cheryl's shouting faltered for a fraction of a second. But they didn't back down, not completely. Pride was a stubborn thing. The crowd began to disperse, the new owner of the truck climbing onto the stage to inspect his prize. The auctioneer packed up his papers. The banners flapped lazily in the breeze. But Patricia and Cheryl stayed rooted, glaring at me like they could set me on fire if they stared long enough. I didn't break eye contact. If anything, I let the silence stretch, let the discomfort settle, until they were the ones who looked away first. I turned, walking slowly toward my house, their voices still echoing behind me. Threats, promises of payback, accusations of theft. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because the truth was, this wasn't over. Not for them. And definitely not for me. I'd just rewritten the rules of our little neighborhood feud. And something told me they were going to make one last, desperate move. Which was fine by me. After all, I'd already proven I was better at playing this game. And I still had a few cards left to play.